Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. In this week's video, we finally have Roadster body number 3 on the property here. We've still got the other 2 Roadster bodies over in the other building. This is the third one we've been talking about all along. This is the body that goes on Brenda's Roadster frame there. It's in primer right now. It's ultimately going to get painted at another shop after we're done with it, but we were asked to do several things to it. One of them is to put a reinforcing structure behind the rear seat, a battery box, a place to put a battery in the trunk. We also been asked to reinforce the dash for basically a structural thing to hold the steering column in place, weld the firewall in place like we did on ours, and then build a floor and a tunnel for the transmission. Once all that's done, then this body's going to go out to another shop not far from here and get painted. But first thing up, we got to get the body on the frame and then start this work. Today we're back in the shop tidying up a couple things we had left to do on the 58 Ford pickup cab. There's still a few more things that we've been asked to do to finish it off before it goes back to the owner. One of which is basically to put either an epoxy primer or a primer preservative or something on the bare metal, all of the bare metal that you see here, and as well as up underneath. What he wants us to do is put some rust preservative or something up on all the bare metal. Coat it again with some paint on top of that, so basically seal everything in. Put seams, well, in between the primer or rust preventative coating or whatever, whether that's POR 15 or some other product. I'm not sure which one we're going to use just yet. We'll put that on. Then we'll put seam sealer on anywhere where there's a seam or a weld or any place where there might be some porosity like underneath. And then I've got to put the doors onto it, put it on a dolly, and then it's going to go back. But one of the things I had to finish off was right over there, that shiny spot on the wall. There was a nice little rust hole right there. I had to cut that out and then weld a patch in over there, so that's done. And then on the floor here, there was some sort of bracket on the outside on the firewall. So when I cut the bottom of these panels off here, I had to take the brackets off. I'll show you in a second. So I had to re-drill these holes and put the brackets on the underside. Again, I'm not 100% sure what they are for. But I wanted to put them, they're right there. I wanted to put them back on just in case it was something like, the front clip attached to. There's one on either side. So maybe somebody watching knows exactly what they are. I don't. I just wanted to put them back where they were and make sure that if they were needed, they were going to be used. So that kind of wraps up the 58 Ford cab for the time being, because what we're going to do, we're going to push it aside for a week or two. The reason being is that on the 32 Ford Roadster body, we have to have everything done onto it within the next 10 to 14 days, because there's a time slot at another shop where the owner is going to get this painted. So the plan is to put the body on the frame, weld the firewall into it, build a floor, build an X member in behind the seat to basically give the body some strength and reinforcing. He supplied the metal there on the floor. That small rod there that you see, we're going to put that along the bottom of the dash to give it some rigidity and to mount the steering column. So the steering column also has to be mounted in. So there's quite a bit to do on this in the next 10 to 14 days before we then take it back off and send it up to get painted. But we'll step you through all those things that we're doing on it. We've done them before. We did them on the Camera Ladies Roadster, but we'll show you again on this one. So follow along as we go to work on Brenda's Roadster body. So getting ready here to put the body on the frame, a couple of things we had to, for housekeeping, we had to take care of. I mentioned it many times. I wanted to bleed all the brakes before we put the body on, but finally got that done. And then because the frame is painted, I wanted to put the webbing on. So this is a material type webbing I've used a few different kinds. I've used a vinyl type. I've used a kind of a webbing that didn't have a sticky backing on it, but this particular stuff here, the gentleman that owns it supplied it. It's got like a sticky back on the back of it right there that when you push down onto it, it sticks to the frame. Didn't want to put the metal frame, the metal body on the frame and scratch stuff up. So kind of got this all in place right now. The sticky back is kind of neat because it doesn't move around. Some people put this on and they'll drill holes and put rivets into it to hold it in place so it doesn't move when you put the body on. I did have to punch holes into it where the threaded holes are in the frame. So all I did, I just went and grabbed a piece of this 1/2-inch piping, I guess, like for making pipe clamps and water pipe, and just basically sharpened that end up with a mini grinder to turn it into a punch, and then just put that webbing down on top of the 2x4, gave her a good whack, and then punched these holes out. I mean, you can buy a punch or just make one and use that later, or make another one when you need another one. So anyways, I'm probably going to take the firewall off as well, fit the body on. Sometimes the firewalls go on tight, sometimes they don't, but we'll get the body on here, fit the firewall, and see how things line up. I am not going to be surprised if the holes in this body don't perfectly line up with the holes in the frame. That's not uncommon. Even when I've had original stuff, there's always something out. So we may have to play with the holes in the body here and open them up, or take a rotary file and oval them up or something to make them fit. That's not ideal, but that's the way it is when you go to fit these on. So hopefully here in a couple minutes, we'll get her at least hovered over the body and see where all the holes line up. So there it is. Brenda's Roadster body is on the frame for the first time. Went on easily, relatively well. The hardest part was actually trying to find a center of gravity for my lifting contraption here. I've used this before on ours. Basically, just soft mounts here with these plastic things on the F clamps that hold it to the dash. The same thing in the back. And then basically move this board back and forth with the F clamps until you find a center of gravity. So this body was a little further back than what mine was, or the camera lady's Roadster was. So once I found the balance point here, it actually came off of the cart quite well. As far as fitting on the frame, fit well in the front, but I found that in the back here, the sub rails in the fender wells were actually bent. The outside part were bent in. I had to lift it up, and actually it might have been damaged at some point. You can see like a little ripple here. I didn't put that in, but what I had to do was actually tap the inside of the sub rails out so it didn't scrape the frame going down over it. So there's some scratches underneath we're gonna have to touch up later. The front part fit in really well. The main bolt holes, like around the seating area here, you can see that they line up, or they did line up quite well. So no issue with that. I've got a little bit of trimming to do on some of these holes in the front. They're not exactly in the right position, but again, like I knew that up front, experienced that before. The firewall bolt holes are in alignment, so everything actually measures from the firewall bolt holes back, so I'm happy with that. I placed the firewall in, it fits okay. I want to make a repair to that notch because the previous owner had made a notch for a brake pedal. We're not going to need it because these brake pedals actually clear it. So I'll weld that up, I'll put the firewall gasket onto it, and I'll place it back in the body. But more than likely I will get that going first, get the gasket into it, get it in, and then start making the modifications to the holes, put the body mount bolts into it, and then strap her down, and then take my lifting device out of the way here. So we're making progress on it, starting to look like a hot rod now. We're getting closer. It's really nice to see it on the frame now. I actually don't mind the black and the burgundy colored frame, but I think the body is going to get painted the same color as the frame. Don't know yet. We're going to find out in a couple weeks. So anyways, follow along, and we're moving along on this project. There's the firewall in. I had quite a hard time getting the firewall in. One thing I noticed with this particular firewall, now the pedigree of this firewall was this firewall originally came from the camera lady's Roadster. I sold it to another friend who was building a project, and then he sold it to the owner of the Roadster here. Now, I've built a couple cars or a couple Roadsters off of that specific firewall, but when I built it off of an original. I measured it off of an original, made it the right height of the original when I built it. And like I said, I made a couple bodies off of it. When I put it on this one, it seemed a little on the tall side. So what I did, I went off of the firewall up on the wall there. Plus we had two other original firewalls over in the other garage, measured the overall height. And what I came up with is that for 3 of those original firewalls, this firewall was actually sitting 5/16 of an inch too tall. So I took it apart. You could see there on the firewall feet bracket, I drilled out the welds and I re-welded them back in place. And then at the bottom there, where you see that welded patch, that's where I welded it up. So right now we've got this particular firewall is the same height as 3 other originals. Now, I guess there is some variation, or must be variation, from firewalls and through the beginning of production to the end of production. But anyways, we've got it all in. I mean, the second difficulty I had was this firewall gasket, which fits right here. You can see that little lip is the part that sits there. It did not want to go into that firewall. It's almost as if it was too wide this way. Now, I've bought probably 6 or 7 of these before and never had that difficulty. I don't know if it was the same manufacturer, but it was almost like this gasket was too wide in this direction. So anyway, we got it in. It was just quite a bit of fighting to get it in there, but it's in. Again, this is hot rodding. This is what happens. I mean, if you change manufacturers or whatever, there could be variability into it. Ultimately, we have it in. It does fit. The holes for the body mounts, the ones I needed to, you could see there I've elongated them some. And over there was probably 5 holes. Now, a lot of times what will happen, at least on the Roadster bodies that I built before, there were 3/8 bolts that go into the frame. I usually made the holes 1/2 inch in diameter, so there was room to go down. We're going to go put some 5/8 bolts with washers in these, tighten things down. Don't be surprised when you have one of these Roadsters that you bought a body and you put it on a different frame, that you may have to shim either the body mounts and the cowl here to lift the cowl up to get the door alignment, or vice versa, have to put some shims underneath the 2 bolts here to twist it the other way. One thing I always liked to do when I was building these bodies was that I always wanted to build the particular body on the frame that it was going to drive on, and that way I could make my adjustments as I go. But the thing is, when you move one body to another frame, it can only have to be at the slightest amount to cause a little bit of misalignment in these doors. It's easily fixed by putting shims either in the cowl or shims underneath where the seat is to basically, bring the back up or bring the cowl up to give you your door alignment. So I did have to put, I think, a 3/32 or 1/8 shim in the front of that in order to get my door alignment back on. Don't be surprised if you have to do that with these. It's actually quite normal and quite common. So next up, like I said, going to put all the bolts into it. We're going to start welding in the firewall. I will put little patches between the cowl and the firewall. I'm going to slowly work my way around there without getting too much heat into it. Because unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but the way it works is this rubber gasket's going to be in there, so I'm going to have to take my time and not put too much heat to catch the gasket on fire. So I'll show you that as we go. Today I welded the firewall in the same way that I did the one on the Camera Ladies Roadster. Essentially cut up 18 gauge strips of metal, tack welded on either side, and just worked my way all the way around. You can't do it quickly. You've got to stay away from you got to have the heat up enough to get penetration, but not enough that you start melting the rubber gasket in behind it. Now, as I mentioned when I did the Camera Ladies Roadster, one of the reasons why we've chosen to do this is because on the 32 pickup we had a little bit of cowl shake. And then I was reading from a well-known California builder, Kugel Components. When they built their 32 Roadster, they welded the firewall in, and it gives a lot of stability to the cowl. There's no movement, there's no shake. So, like I said, when we did it for the Camera Ladies Roadster, the gentleman owns this one. He wanted me to do the same thing here. Next up, what I'm going to do, or as you can see, since I've been talking, I've started to make cardboard cutouts for the floorboards. I think I'm going to make it in a couple pieces. The complication is going to be when we bring the body in over with the welded in floors. We need to be able to bring it in over the emergency brake handle and the pedals. So emergency brake handle is not a problem. Cut a hole in the floor, you're going to drop it straight down over. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the driver's side floor in. But I think what I'm going to do is make like a little cutout so that when we drop the body in over it, there's lots of room to go over the pedals. And there'll be like a metal insert that'll go up over and come up against the pedals with some rubber around it and stuff. So going to carry on, start cutting out some metal pieces and bead rolling some stuff. Oh, and in the middle of the driver's side, we will cut a hole right here for an access panel for the two master cylinders that are underneath the floor. Now that I have both sides cut out in cardboard, I realize I don't have enough of this 1/2-inch square tubing. What I like to do with the 1/2-inch square tubing is I'll put a piece away, a piece across from where the floor kicks up, goes over the transmission hump, do a little loop and over to the side. And then what I do is I use the 1/2 inch all the way around to basically put the sheet metal on. If you don't do that, the sheet metal will actually sit down below the subframe here, like the pan does underneath the seat. You can do that in the front, but what you'll have to do is actually fill that section up with like 1/2-inch plywood or something like that to bring it up level. Otherwise your carpet is going to be not flat in that area. So what I've done before is I've always used this 1/2-inch square tubing to go around and make a frame up. So I'm going to continue on with this in this episode, but what I'm going to do is I've got some more of this 1/2-inch square tubing coming in. Should be here tomorrow. We'll carry on with it then. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to the dash for now. I'm going to make the reinforcing piece for the bottom of the dash. So what I've got is I've got some 3/4 inch square tubing. I'm going to bend it to the shape of the bottom of the dash, and then I'm going to put some tabs on either end. So what I've done with my dash or the Camera Ladies Roadster, I actually put this in and welded it to the bottom of the dash and then welded my dash in place. What the owner of Brenda's Roadster wants us to do is actually make this and actually put it in the cowl, weld it to the sides, but still have the dash come out separately. You can go on Instagram. A few other people are doing the same thing. It's not an original idea. A lot of people put this bar across and then they mount the steering column to the bar, which is rigidly mounted to the cowl. And it just gives for a stronger steering column mount. Kind of like the idea. So I'm going to get this bent up and I'll show you how it fits. There is the 3/4 inch square tubing all bent up, basically to conform to the shape of the bottom of the dash. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to trim off about an inch for the initial stage and start fitting it into the cowl. Now all I did with this, I just stuck it in the vise, put my foot up against the table and just kept bending it side to side until I followed the contour. I watched another fellow take this and just whacking on the concrete floor. Maybe that works, but it leaves a lot of dents in the concrete floor and it hurts your hand. There's all kinds of things you can do besides whacking it on the concrete floor to shape the metal. Put it in the vise and bend it. You can stick it over in a hydraulic press and in between two blocks and give it a slight curve until you get the right shape. There's tubing benders, but I mean, basically, like I said, I just stuck that in my vise and I just kept working my way along, inching it along, and just basically braced my foot up against the table here and just kept working it until I have it bent, and took probably about 20 minutes or so. So we've got it here and I don't have any chips in my concrete floor. Anyways, we're going to cut this, put some tabs onto it, and hopefully we'll get her welded in. So I made sure that the dash could go in and out before I weld. Well, I tack welded it in place and double checked it, and then I welded the support in place. So the dash is in there right now. I'm going to try and take it out one-handed here. They are a little bit tricky to get out, in and out, even without the bar. But there's the bar welded in place right now on other end. We've got, I mean, there's no wiggle in that cowl anymore with the firewall welded in and this brace here. So the brace is fully welded in. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to mount the steering column, because we've got to make a little metal drop here and then cut the hole in the firewall and then cut the universal joints up and the shaft. So hopefully I can do this in one piece. We'll see what the angles are. If not, we'll have to put a knuckle in between. As you can see from here, I didn't get steering column in. One of the things I'd used before for making and installing the steering column is I have a piece of 1.5 ABS pipe, which is approximately 2 inches outside diameter, that I use to basically dummy up and position where the hole is on the firewall. I've got it cut on an angle and I can cut a nice little oval shaped hole based upon it. I think one of the kids needed something fixed in their plumbing, and I might have actually sacrificed it to go fix something. So anyways, I decided to carry on working on the car, go to the next project. I'll go get some ABS pipe tomorrow and I'll make a new one up. But in the meantime, what I've done is I've put this reinforcing structure in the back of the Roadster body. Now, all of the Roadster bodies I've done before had basically a package tray, so to speak. It would go along the back here. It came down and had a flat surface on it, and that's what the original wood came up against for an original seat. This body was not ordered with it, so what I had to do is actually mount this reinforcing structure a little further back. The other thing is that the reinforcing structure here that I've made is made from 1.5 inch square tubing. Now, normally I would use 1 inch, either 62 thou wall or 125 wall, which is more than strong enough, and then I would make like an X structure. But because this material is 1.5 inch square and 1/8 wall or 125 wall, it's quite rigid. So when you weld it into a square, there's really no give like this way. So when I started putting this in, before I welded it to the body, I checked the diagonals from the B-pillars. One problem I found was that when I closed this door, the bottom lip here stuck out quite a bit. And then on the other side, it actually stuck in. So that told me there was some alignment issues. Now, I've put quite a few of these bodies together before. And usually before I tie in those brackets there to the wheel well, I actually do make my alignment. And I usually put one of these structures in and I square the body up on the B-pillars up on the frame to this structure in the back, and then that way I'm assured of complete alignment. What I had to do in this case here was that I took a ratchet strap, that one right there. And I tied the ratchet strap on the top part of this post down to the bottom there, and I basically pulled the top of this B-pillar in, and once I got alignment, then I actually welded this reinforcing structure here to the top of the quarter panel. I made up this little piece of sheet metal here that actually is spot welded up in the back. Did the same thing on the other corner there. And that way, the rear, it's a way of actually aligning the rear of the body so that your B-pillars are straight in alignment, and you've got that kind of alignment where the door kicks out in the bottom. Now, if it would have been just one door, I would have been suspicious, and maybe the door skin, you can actually take the doors and twist them a little bit, but these doors were all welded. Couldn't really do that easily, and I saw one stuck out too far on one side and in too far on the other, which told me that, you know, the body was actually tilted this way a little bit on the top. Don't be surprised with somebody's with an old body or even a reproduction that you've got to go do that, but that's how you would align the back part of the doors. If you've got you know, a positive and negative on the other side, that means the body is actually just pushed out. And it was only, I think, about just under 1/4 of an inch that I actually had to push this B-pillar in this way, which subsequently pushed the other B-pillar over the other way to correct that door alignment. So anyway, we've got that done. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go out and I'll get a piece of ABS, and I will continue working and installing the steering column. Making some progress here with the steering column. I went out and got a piece of 1.5 inch ABS, which you just have to wrap a little bit of masking tape around to basically simulate the steering column. It's just easier to move it in and out and play with where it's going to be. For the most part, the center of the steering wheel needs to be between 9 and 10 inches from the side here. You don't want to go over too far, because then you start playing with the angles, and you got to go close enough so that it's kind of in a straight line. So what I've got so far, I have got a really short drop because the gentleman owns this. He wants the maximum clearance with the steering wheel as opposed to a steering wheel being set down. So we want to bring the steering wheel up and down as much as possible, kind of like what I did on the pickup truck. Right now, I just use some angle iron there to weld it to that structure. And what we have, we've got a pretty decent fit right now. So I took the ABS and cut, it's about a 45-degree angle. I think maybe 47 or whatever, in this particular case at the end. And then I took a magic marker and then drew a hole in the firewall and cut the plasma cutter out over there, and we cut a nasty hole. I'm not that good at cutting with the plasma cutter, but I'm functional. And then we dressed up the hole with the rotary files. So right now I've got the right size hole. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to get the actual steering column. I'm going to put that drop up there, and then we're going to start putting the steering column in and working and putting the lower steering column support in next. Now we've got the lower steering column mount put in place there. I've used this particular one a few times before. You can get it from Speedway. There's other types too, like a ball and socket type. I've used that once before. This one's relatively straightforward and inexpensive. What will happen is that when it gets carpeted and finished, there'll be like a little rubber pad put around it to kind of keep any kind of water or wind or whatever coming in. But it's pretty solid now, especially with the extra bracket up top. On the outside here, the steering linkage, I was able to actually get away with just 2 U-joints. The angle is not extreme enough that requires 2 knuckles and a steady bearing, so there's no binding on the U-joints or whatnot, and there's no excessive angle, so it clears. So it's all good. That's a little bit less work, and we don't have to actually weld anything on the frame. So steering's installed. Took a little bit less time by only putting the two U-joints in instead of having to put three. But we've got steering column in, and now we're off to the next task. So I thought we're going to get some more done on the Brenda's Roadster. There's still a few more things to do, but I'm going to have to wait till next week because we're kind of running out of time for this week's video. So just kind of recapping what we did on Brenda's Roadster. We basically got it on the frame, got the welting on. We welded the firewall in, built the cowl support that the steering columns, is connected to and is supported by. I mean, that actually ties in this cowl. It's very rigid now. The owner is quite happy with it. We also put the reinforcing structure here behind the seat. Now, what we normally did for the other Roadsters, because it had a package tray here, this actually sat a little bit further forward. What the gentleman wants, he wants to maximize the seat space in here, so the seat is going to come in and probably come up almost up against the structure, and that kind of goes with the same theme with the steering column. Instead of putting a larger drop on the steering column, we put a shorter one in, and we put the steering column as far forward as we could. Worst comes to worst, later on, we could put a larger steering drop into it and a longer steering column, and for someone that's smaller, but we kind of have to suit the build for the people that own the car. We did connect up to the steering box. I thought we were going to have to put like 3 universal joints into it and a steady bearing. But once I get it in, the angles aren't acute enough to really make that necessary. So we're able to pull it off with just basically 2 steering joints, and everything turns freely and it works good. So what we have to do on the next video, have to finish off the floor, ideally build a battery box for it. And the other thing I thought about that I never talked to him about is actually put a small bracket or something up underneath the dash that will ultimately connect the fuse box to. You don't want to have to start drilling holes in the firewall later on. We want to do that before the car goes out and get painted. So we're going to try and wrap up all of this stuff in the next video, in a shorter video before Christmas, because we're going to try and get this back off of the frame and out to York Restorations, who's going to do the final paint on it. So that's it for this week's video. We're making progress on Brenda's Roadster. There's just one of them. But that's it for this week. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe, and come back and see us next week. And everybody have a good one. Take care.